on the far trees. There was almost total quiet as everybody watched the young princess walk down the line of cadets. Hal could hear the sound of the footsteps approaching. He knew that she was the embodiment of his country, that he was doing his best to please, and that he always would. He thought of God, his hazy, humble idea of God, and dared to hope he could please him, too. Hal, flanked by his peers, and not alone, thought briefly of his father, watching him from the crowd, with all his battles behind him, and of his mother next to him, quietly satisfied. Then his mind focused again on the exact present. The group of officers, aides, and the princess came into the side of his vision and across it, and his eyes didn't waver. He could see the top of her cream-coloured hat out of focus at the bottom of his field of vision. She paused briefly. She passed him, and she moved on, and the small group with her moved on too, down the line. Hal's girl was called Clara Ward. She was watching from the crowd with her parents and younger brother, and later at the Sovereign's ball she would dance with him. Clara was the sister of Hal's friend James. Hal had gone back with James to stay with his family a few times in Buckinghamshire, and that was how they had met. Clara and James's family house was a village house, a wide red-brick villa, with white-painted door and gate, white sills and sashes, and a big garden. It had a lilac tree, apple trees, roses, and a well-kept lawn that had a stream with a small bridge over it. Clara and her two brothers had grown up there and gone to and from their various schools, and the house showed the small scars of their childhood in its crooked swing and worn carpets. It was a house for Christmases and summers, for school holidays, rocking horses, and chicken pox. It had seen wooden toys, rattles, satchels, and raincoats, and then, later, it had seen evening clothes and beaded bags on thin chains left on the hall chairs, as Clara and James, tired from their parties, went upstairs to bed. Hal had seen Clara for the first time one weekend, in the first weeks of his training. They had arrived after tea on a Saturday. James had been talking to his father about money, and Hal had thought he'd better go out into the garden for a smoke, and to be out of the way. There was a bluish dusk just settling, and Clara was coming into the drawing-room. She had her arms full of wet flowers, and Hal, avoiding a small table, had almost bumped into her. He had apologized, and they had shaken hands, awkwardly. Her hand was wet from the flowers. Hal said, "You must be James's sister," and Clara answered, "Yes, I'm Clara." She said Clara as her brother did, to rhyme with dare or fair, and then, "Are you Hal?" "Yes, Hal." And he had been silenced by her voice and the look of her, and had not known what to say. They stepped around each other. He had gone out into the garden and had his cigarette. She had gone into the kitchen to put the flowers in water, but the picture of her stayed in his mind. She was pale and had dark brown hair, the colour of conkers or a bay horse, and her eyes were marine blue. She was 17 then. He was 19. Hal had set about seeing more of Clara with determination, and over the few months of his training he would come back with James whenever they were allowed a weekend. His own parents' house was near Warminster in Somerset, not far from Stonehenge. It was faced with dark grey, and had a well-proportioned front, and other older and more complicated sections attached and interlocking behind. It bore the wind that came off Salisbury Plain stoically, with barely a rattle of its Victorian windows. Hal was always happy to be back in the big chilly rooms, with their familiar echoes, the gilt-framed paintings. The grim colours of the house and its coldness were nourishing to him. Although before visiting the wards he had never noticed the look of his own house before, he still felt more comfortable with its discomfort than he ever did in that light village house. He was happy with the silent mealtimes and bare boards of home, but he needed to be near Clara, and tolerated her jolly, messy family well enough to see her. Hal and Clara had written to one another, letters more intimate than they ever were.